The Grand Hall of Eldrith Academy was unlike any other in the kingdom. Towering ceilings arched like frozen waves, and sunlight filtered through stained glass windows that cast fractured rainbows across polished marble floors. The air was thick with anticipation, buzzing like the hum of 1,000 wings. Today was the day that would determine the fate of the realm's future rulers, the day of the final test, a trial so feared that legend spoke of no royal ever having passed it. At the far end of the hall, on a dais carved from black stone veined with crimson, sat the Dragon Lady. She was a figure of myth and authority, her presence alone enough to silence a crowd. Silver scales glimmered faintly under the sunlight that dared to touch her. Horns curved backward over her skull, and her eyes were molten gold, sharp and piercing, taking in every detail with predatory precision. Even the air around her seemed to tremble as if respecting her power. One by one, the royal heirs filed into the hall. Each bore the weight of legacy, the pride of dynasties, the hope of kingdoms, the whispered expectation that they were destined for greatness. Their armor gleamed brilliantly, polished steel, gold inlays, sigils of their houses, but for all its shine, it could not mask the tension in their shoulders, the nervous twitch in a hand, the forced steadiness of a smile. The first to step forward was Prince Aldrich of the Eastern Vale, a young man whose confidence often bordered on arrogance. He strode with a practiced gait, head high, gaze fixed on the Dragon Lady. The crowd murmured, some with admiration, others with doubt. Aldrich raised his hand and spoke the ancient words that signaled the beginning of the final test. Immediately, the ground beneath him rumbled. Tiles shifted, walls seemed to breathe, and illusions of fire and shadow danced across the hall. Aldrich's eyes widened. The illusions twisted into forms familiar and terrifying, enemies from legends, monsters from old folktales, but he pressed on, raising his sword with a flourish. Sparks flew as steel met ethereal forms. He fought valiantly, but with each strike, the illusions adapted. His carefully honed skills, taught by the finest masters in the kingdom, faltered under the cunning precision of the trial. Within moments, he was thrown to his knees, chest heaving, pride wounded far beyond the scratches on his armor. The Dragon Lady's laugh echoed like rolling thunder. Next came Princess Celine, known for her intellect and tactical mind. She approached the dais with quiet determination, her robes flowing like liquid silver. She did not wield a weapon, relying instead on strategy and her understanding of the magical constructs that the test demanded. For a brief moment, the whole thought she might succeed. She predicted every trap, calculated every illusion, but the Dragon Lady was merciless. Each solution she devised led to new, unforeseen challenges. Within minutes, Celine was caught in a shifting maze of mirrors and fire, her confident composure crumbling. She, too, fell, gasping and shaken. The trials continued. Prince Roderick of the Western Marches, famed for his brute strength, attempted to force his way through, swinging a mighty battle-axe at invisible adversaries. Prince Joran of the Northern Reaches, a master of elemental magic, tried to control the flames and shadows. Princess Lysandra, celebrated for her agility and cunning, darted through traps with precision unmatched by even her peers. Yet all failed. Each demonstration of talent was met with a clever counter from the Dragon Lady, whose smile never wavered, whose golden eyes gleamed with a mix of amusement and challenge. From the back of the hall, hidden in the shadow of a towering column, a quiet figure watched. He was hardly noticeable, shorter than most of the royals, cloaked in simple garments that marked him as a scholar rather than a warrior. Books and scrolls were his armor, wit and observation his weapons. No one paid him any attention. The nobles whispered among themselves, barely sparing a glance at the student who had always been overlooked. Yet he did not flinch. He did not doubt. His eyes, sharp and calculating, followed the Dragon Lady's every movement, reading the subtle cues of her power, the rhythm of her illusions, the faint patterns she left in the chaotic trial. The murmurs in the hall grew louder. No one has ever passed. What hope does he have? Why even allow him to step forward? Yet despite the skepticism, the quiet figure remained calm, adjusting the strap of a leather satchel that contained nothing more dangerous than ink, paper, and a few small trinkets. It was as if he knew something the rest of the kingdom did not. Finally, the Dragon Lady's gaze fell upon him. Her laughter, which had carried over the failures of the royals like wildfire, turned sharp, mocking. "And who is this?" she hissed, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "A bookworm, a scholar, you dare stand before me?" She gestured with a clawed hand, motioning to the trial that had defeated the best of the best. "Very well, little mouse. Let us see how long your clever mind lasts." The hall seemed to hold its breath. Every eye followed him as he stepped onto the polished marble, each footfall measured, deliberate. The royals watched with thinly veiled disbelief, some smirking, some shaking their heads, certain that the outcome was already decided. Even the teachers and elders present whispered to each other, astonished that this overlooked student had been allowed the opportunity. But the quiet figure did not falter. His eyes met the dragon lady's, steady and unafraid. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, not of arrogance, but of confidence, a subtle acknowledgement that he had prepared for this moment his entire life. The crowd did not yet understand, the royals did not yet see, and the dragon lady had not yet realized. This was a challenge unlike any she had encountered before. And so, the final test began once more. But this time, something in the air felt different, charged with a quiet tension that promised the impossible might just unfold. The grand hall, the ancient trials, and the legendary dragon lady herself were about to witness a challenge unlike any other, a test not of heritage or brute strength, but of intellect, ingenuity, and a courage the kingdom had never anticipated. The grand hall, once filled with the echoes of confident footsteps, had become a chamber of tension, anticipation, and growing dread. The royals who had stepped forward to face the final test now lay scattered across the polished marble, defeated not just in body but in spirit. The illusions, the traps, and the challenges of the dragon lady were relentless, adapting to each attempt with a cunning that no human mind had ever fully anticipated. Prince Aldrich of the Eastern Vale, whose arrogance had been as shining and sharp as his armor, struggled to his feet. His pride had taken the brunt of the failure. The gold inlays of his gauntlets were scratched, his hair disheveled, his chest heaving as he tried to reclaim the composure that had failed him mere minutes ago. The illusion that had sent him sprawling still lingered, a massive shadow, flickering like smoke, with eyes that burned into his memory. Even now, he reached for his sword instinctively, though the steel seemed useless against what was not truly there. Princess Celine, who had relied on intellect and strategy, sat cross-legged in a shattered circle of floating mirrors, blinking rapidly as if trying to recalibrate her mind. She had predicted every sequence, calculated every trap, yet the dragon lady had outwitted her at every turn. The illusions moved unpredictably, shifting angles, changing forms, and challenging her assumptions. Her mind, brilliant as it was, could not anticipate the fluid creativity of the dragon lady's design. For the first time in her life, the calm certainty that had defined her faltered. Prince Roderick of the Western Marches, a man whose strength had been legendary across his province, had swung his axe with devastating force. Yet each strike met only air or the ephemeral forms conjured by the dragon lady. His muscles ached, his knuckles raw from gripping the weapon, and still, the illusions pressed on, unyielding and adaptive. Rage flashed in his eyes, raw frustration boiling over as he realized that brute strength, the foundation of his entire identity, was useless here. He roared, a sound meant to intimidate, but it bounced off the walls and returned hollow, swallowed by the magic of the hall. Prince Joran of the Northern Reaches, the kingdom's most skilled elemental mage, attempted to bend fire and water, lightning and wind, to his will. Sparks and flames erupted, twisting violently, yet each element was countered, absorbed, or redirected by the invisible hands of the dragon lady's magic. The flames he conjured turned into harmless sparks, the walls he raised melted away before they could protect him. Sweat beaded his forehead as he realized that knowledge of spells, no matter how vast, was no guarantee of survival in this trial. Even the most learned sorcerers of the kingdom would fall here. Princess Lysandra, nimble, precise, and celebrated for her agility, had darted through the shifting maze of traps with extraordinary grace. But the dragon lady's illusions were unpredictable, almost alive. The platforms beneath her feet tilted without warning, walls closed in like jaws, and shadows stretched like grasping fingers. She somersaulted, rolled, and spun, but a momentary misstep sent her crashing into a shimmering barrier that wasn't there moments before. Her gasp echoed like a cry in the vast hall, and she, too, was defeated. The dragon lady watched from her dais with a mixture of amusement and calculated precision. Every misstep, every faltering attempt, every quiver of fear or frustration in the royal's eyes was a note in her symphony of power. She moved not with haste, but with the deliberate rhythm of a predator observing prey, her golden eyes cold yet sparkling with twisted delight. When she laughed, the sound rolled through the hall like distant thunder, shaking even the banners hanging from the walls. So eager, so certain, and yet so utterly predictable, she murmured, her voice carrying a mocking resonance that made the royals flinch. The crowd, previously hushed by awe and anticipation, now murmured in disbelief. Whispers filled the space between columns. How is it possible? They've trained their entire lives, even the strongest, the smartest, the most agile, they all failed. The nobles shifted nervously, aware that something unprecedented was happening. In the stories of the final test, some had approached, yes, but none had faltered so completely, so publicly, and in such humiliating fashion. Even the teachers and elders observing the trial from the balcony above were unsettled. Their faces, usually masks of composure, betrayed shock and unease. One elder whispered under his breath, "I have never seen a display of failure like this, not even in the chronicles of the old wars." Another shook his head, murmuring, "The Dragon Lady, she has surpassed even the legends." And yet, amidst the chaos of failure, one figure remained unnoticed. Hidden in the shadow of a towering column, he watched. The quiet student, cloaked in simple robes and carrying nothing more than his satchel of scrolls and tools, observed every failure with meticulous attention. Each royal's misstep, every adaptation of the Dragon Lady's illusions, every flaw in strategy and strength, it was all data, patterns to be analyzed. He did not panic. He did not doubt. He did not even flinch as the Dragon Lady's mocking laughter rolled through the hall, echoing over the shattered dreams of those who had come before him. For a moment, the hall seemed frozen in disbelief. The royals had failed spectacularly, and the crowd was reeling from the magnitude of what had just occurred. Yet the quiet student remained, calm and observant, his mind already racing with possibilities, strategies, and solutions that no one else could yet conceive. The contrast was striking. The proud heirs, the kingdom's future leaders, had crumbled under pressure, while the overlooked scholar stood quietly, ready to face a challenge that had bested them all. The Dragon Lady's gaze finally shifted to him, a slow narrowing of molten gold eyes. She arched one eyebrow, her smirk returning. "Interesting," she hissed, the single word dripping with amusement and curiosity. Perhaps there is hope yet. Come forward, little one, and show me if your mind is as sharp as your silence suggests." The hall held its breath once more, the tension palpable and thick. Every noble, every teacher, every spectator turned their eyes toward the quiet figure, the one who had been invisible until this moment. And as he stepped forward, measured and deliberate, it became clear. The final test was about to enter a new chapter, one that no one, not even the Dragon Lady, could predict. The hall had grown tense in a way that felt almost tangible. The air shimmered with unspoken disbelief, the echoes of the royal spectacular failures still lingering like the residue of a storm. Every noble, every teacher, every onlooker was fixated on the empty space where the next challenger was to appear. All eyes, finally, settled on the quiet figure who had been unnoticed until now. He was unremarkable at first glance. A simple student, robed in plain clothes, carrying nothing more threatening than a satchel of books and scrolls. No sword gleamed at his side, no golden sigils adorned his armor, no magical aura radiated around him. He looked ordinary. And yet, as he stepped from the shadow of the towering column, there was an aura of calm precision about him. Each step was measured, deliberate, as though he had rehearsed them 1,000 times, not for show, but for understanding. The Dragon Lady's eyes narrowed. She had seen centuries of warriors, rulers, and champions come before her. Each had relied on strength, courage, skill, or magic, only to be crushed by her ever-changing trials. And now, this? She arched an eyebrow, a slow, incredulous smile curling across her scaled lips. "A scholar," she hissed, her voice echoing through the hall. "You dare face me? You, who have never held a sword, never commanded armies, never wielded power beyond ink and paper." A ripple of laughter ran through the assembled nobles. Even the most composed of them could not suppress the smirk that tugged at their lips. They had expected spectacle, strength, skill, heroism. And instead, here stood a boy, small and quiet, whose very presence seemed to mock the grandeur of the hall. Whispers rose from the crowd, "What hope does he have? The test will crush him like the rest, why even allow him to step forward?" But the quiet student did not flinch. He met the Dragon Lady's golden gaze with a steady, unwavering stare. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a calm confidence that unnerved those watching. He did not raise his voice, nor did he rush. He simply adjusted the strap of his satchel and took his place at the threshold of the trial. The Dragon Lady tilted her head, studying him like a predator studying a particularly curious mouse. "Very well," she said, her tone dripping with mockery. "Show me your brilliance, or your ruin." Then, with a subtle flick of her clawed hand, the whole shifted once more. The illusions that had defeated the royals returned, more elaborate, more unpredictable. Shadows stretched across the walls like grasping fingers. Platforms rose and fell with deadly precision. Fiery walls split the floor, and specters of long-forgotten monsters flickered in and out of reality. It was the same trial, yet amplified, more cunning, and impossibly cruel. The crowd watched with bated breath as the quiet student took in every detail. His eyes darted across the hall, noting the slight tremor in a shifting platform, the faint shimmer of a mirror poised to trap him, the subtle rhythm of a flame that seemed almost alive. Unlike the royals, he did not charge or react hastily. Instead, he observed. Calculated. Anticipated. A hush fell over the hall as he took his first step forward. The illusions twisted, shadows lunged, fire roared, but he moved with a precision that made it clear he was not merely reacting, he was predicting, understanding the patterns that had shattered the princes and princesses. The dragon lady's smirk faltered for the first time. Her golden eyes narrowed, intrigued. Unusual, she murmured. So calm, so deliberate. Perhaps I underestimated this little scholar. He navigated the first set of traps with effortless grace, stepping through illusions that had ensnared the most agile royals. Where brute force failed, he applied logic. Where magic failed, he applied insight. The crowd began to murmur in disbelief. The royals who had sneered at his approach now watched with growing unease. Teachers leaned forward, whispering to one another, "He sees it, he understands it." The dragon lady's amusement shifted subtly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her golden eyes. She intensified the trial, hurling more illusions, more fire, more shadows, yet he adapted instantly. A wall of flames rose before him, and he ducked under it with the precision of a practiced acrobat. A shadow beast lunged, and he sidestepped, countering with a clever use of reflective mirrors and angles to divert its path. Each success was a quiet defiance, a statement that the final test could be faced without royal birthright, without brute strength, without flashy power. A low murmur began to spread through the hall. He's doing it. The royals couldn't, and yet even some of the defeated princes and princesses turned their heads, unable to believe their eyes. The quiet student, the overlooked scholar, the so-called nerd, was moving through the impossible trial as though he had been born for it. The dragon lady's smirk vanished completely now. She leaned forward slightly, her predatory curiosity sharpening. "So, this is why you were allowed here," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her claws flexed, the air around her vibrating subtly with power. "Not for your strength, not for your lineage, but for your mind. Clever, very clever indeed." The hall was silent, the tension so thick it could be sliced with a sword. Every step, every calculated move by the student, was amplified in the minds of all watching. The royals, humiliated and defeated, could do nothing but gape. The teachers could do nothing but whisper in astonishment. And the dragon lady, the legendary test giver who had crushed generations of heirs, could do nothing but watch, her amusement replaced by a fascination that bordered on disbelief. The quiet student paused briefly at the center of the hall, facing the dragon lady directly. No fear. No hesitation. Only a steady, unwavering confidence that radiated outward, commanding attention. The impossible had begun to feel possible, and the kingdom's destiny, the very definition of power, was about to be rewritten. The first move was made. The test was no longer a trial of strength or magic. It had become a battle of minds, and for the first time, the whole realized that the underdog, the overlooked, underestimated, quiet scholar, was a force unlike any it had ever seen. The whole held its breath. Every eye was fixed on the quiet student, the overlooked scholar who had somehow survived the initial onslaught of the dragon lady's final test. The illusions, the traps, and the elemental hazards that had crushed the kingdom's finest heirs now met a challenger unlike any before. And yet, he did not hesitate. Where the royals had relied on strength, he relied on observation. Where they had relied on raw power, he relied on intellect. And where they had faltered in arrogance or panic, he moved with calm, deliberate precision. Each step was calculated, each glance analyzing the subtle cues of the dragon lady's creations. He noted the barely perceptible flicker of a shadow, the imperceptible tremor of a floating platform, the faint shimmer of a magical barrier. He did not merely react, he anticipated. A wall of fire erupted in front of him, twisting and snapping with unpredictable fury. Most would have frozen, or lunged recklessly. But he tilted his body, using the momentum of a moving platform to vault gracefully through the flames. At the same time, he tossed a small, intricately carved mirror from his satchel. It caught the light of the fire and reflected it back in a precise angle, disrupting the illusion's magical pattern. The flames warped and twisted harmlessly aside, leaving him unscathed. A collective gasp echoed through the hall. The dragon lady's golden eyes narrowed. Her amusement had begun to shift into something sharper, curiosity, intrigue, even a hint of wariness. She leaned forward on her dais, claws flexing subtly. HFY, clever, she murmured, her voice a mixture of praise and disbelief. You do not fight like the others, but will your cleverness hold? Suddenly, the whole transformed. Platforms rotated violently, and the air thickened with illusions that seemed to reach for him, clawing and twisting in impossible angles. Shadow beasts emerged, their forms shifting unpredictably, their movements too fast for any ordinary warrior to track. And yet, he did not falter. He analyzed their motions, noticing patterns in their randomness. A slight delay between the flicker of shadow and its strike, the rhythm of the platform's rotation, the subtle magic pulse that indicated the illusion's core. Using his satchel, he produced small gadgets and reflective tools, ingenious devices that redirected energy, blocked illusions, and manipulated the environment in ways that even the Dragon Lady had not anticipated. A shadow beast lunged from above, and he dodged effortlessly, sending a reflective shard spinning in the air. The shard hit the illusion at the perfect angle, dispersing it into harmless smoke. Another attack followed, a barrage of magical spikes emerging from the floor, but he had already calculated their trajectory and leapt across, landing perfectly on a rotating platform. The crowd could hardly believe their eyes. This was not luck. This was strategy, intelligence, and ingenuity applied in perfect harmony. Even the Dragon Lady was forced to pause. Her eyes, usually sharp with amusement, widened slightly. She had faced kings, warriors, and mags, but none had approached her challenge with such a combination of intellect and adaptability. Every test she threw at him was countered with precision, every trap neutralized before it could threaten him. Her smirk flickered, replaced by the first trace of astonishment she had ever shown in centuries of administering the final test. The spectators began to murmur in awe. The nobles, who had mocked him moments ago, now whispered in disbelief, How is he doing this? The test is impossible, yet he, teachers leaned forward, their jaws tight with amazement. Even the defeated royals, who had been certain of their own superiority, watched helplessly as the quiet scholar moved through challenges that had crushed the kingdom's finest heirs. And still, he pressed on. Every move was deliberate, every action measured. He began solving puzzles that were more abstract than physical, arcane riddles woven into the floor, patterns of light and shadow that required intuition and reasoning rather than brute strength. He read the rhythm of the Dragon Lady's illusions as if they were a language, decoding the subtle shifts and exploiting weaknesses hidden within her perfection. One by one, the obstacles fell away. A series of rotating platforms, previously impossible to navigate, became a calculated path under his careful steps. Magical spikes froze midair, rerouted by clever devices and keen observation. Even the most devious illusions, the kind designed to twist perception and mislead the mind, were outwitted with ingenuity and foresight. The Dragon Lady's laughter had ceased entirely. She leaned back, observing, her golden eyes now wide with shock and fascination. The student's brilliance was undeniable. Impossible, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. No royal, no warrior, none have ever, her words faltered, caught between centuries of certainty and the startling reality before her eyes. The crowd's whispers had turned into an almost reverent silence. Some spectators dared to cheer, but quickly hushed themselves, afraid to break the spell of the moment. The impossible had begun to feel possible. The overlooked, underestimated scholar, the one who had seemed so ordinary, was navigating the final test with a combination of intelligence, creativity, and unshakable calm that none had anticipated. Finally, he paused at the center of the hall. He looked around, assessing the Dragon Lady herself, noting the faintest twitch of her expression, the slight flare of her nostrils. He realized that the final challenge was not just in the illusions or the traps, it was in the observer. The true test was the Dragon Lady herself, and he was ready. A subtle, almost imperceptible smile played across his lips. The hall held its breath. For the first time in the history of Eldrith Academy, the impossible seemed within reach. The Dragon Lady, legendary and feared, was about to witness a brilliance that no one had ever expected, one that could redefine the very meaning of power and mastery. And in that tense, silent moment, the kingdom realized something extraordinary. The quiet, overlooked student was no longer just surviving the final test. He was excelling. Outthinking centuries of expectation. Outmaneuvering the impossible. Outshining those who had mocked him. The impossible had begun. The hall was impossibly silent. Every spectator, noble, and teacher hung on the edge of disbelief, their eyes fixed on the quiet student who had defied every expectation. The Dragon Lady, once so unyielding and unshakable, now leaned forward, her golden eyes wide with astonishment. For centuries, she had administered the final test, crushing kings, princes, and heirs with ease. Yet here, for the first time, someone had not only survived, he had outshone them all. The last set of illusions twisted around him like living shadows. Fiery walls hissed and roared, platforms spun wildly, and spectral beasts lunged from impossible angles. The crowd held its breath, certain that even this prodigy must falter at the final hurdle. But the student's gaze was steady, his movements deliberate. Each trap he neutralized, each illusion he unraveled, was done with an elegance and precision that made the impossible look effortless. The dragon lady's voice, usually thunderous, now trembled with something close to awe. Incredible, no one has ever, her words faltered. Her smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression that teetered between astonishment and grudging admiration. She flexed her claws subtly, not in aggression, but as if testing whether this was truly possible. He reached the center of the hall. The final challenge lay before him, a colossal mirror, its surface shifting like liquid silver, reflecting not just his image but the fears, doubts, and ambitions of every royal who had failed before him. It was said that few could confront this mirror without being overwhelmed, their mind collapsing under the illusions of inadequacy and despair. He studied it calmly. He saw the reflections of the defeated royals, their arrogance, their panic, their reliance on strength over intellect. He saw the expectations of the kingdom pressing down, heavy as stone. And for the first time, the dragon lady moved closer, her gaze unwavering, as if daring him to falter. The student smiled faintly. He did not panic. He did not hesitate. With a careful, deliberate step, he approached the mirror. His hands traced subtle, calculated movements in the air, almost as if conducting an unseen symphony. The reflections wavered, twisted, and tried to taunt him, but he remained focused. Using his knowledge of patterns, observation, and ingenuity, he manipulated the illusions within the mirror. Slowly, impossibly, the shifting images aligned, not against him, but in harmony with his mind. The whole gasped. The impossible was happening. Where every royal had been trapped and broken, he moved through the mirror as if it were a doorway. Light flared, the air vibrated with energy, and the illusions that had seemed invincible collapsed silently, leaving the hall bathed in the golden sunlight streaming through the stained glass. The dragon lady's mouth fell open. Her golden eyes, wide with shock, followed every movement. For centuries, she had believed herself untouchable, unbeatable, unchallenged. And yet, here was a scholar, a quiet, unassuming student, who had mastered the final test, not through brute strength, not through lineage, but through intellect, observation, and courage. The silence shattered as the crowd erupted. Nobles, teachers, and even the defeated royals leapt to their feet, cheering, gasping, and whispering in disbelief. The princes and princesses who had mocked him could do nothing but stare, their pride humbled, their arrogance undone by a mind they had overlooked. The dragon lady, legendary and feared, slowly rose from her dais. Her smirk, once mocking, had transformed into a look of profound respect. She pointed a claw toward the student, her voice carrying through the hall in a tone that few had ever heard from her, sharp, commanding, yet edged with admiration. You have done what no royal ever could. You are extraordinary. Even as the words left her lips, the magnitude of the moment rippled through the kingdom. A quiet, unassuming student had bested the impossible. The royals, who had relied on birthright, strength, and reputation, had been eclipsed by intellect, ingenuity, and unshakable composure. The final test had been conquered, not by legacy, not by power, but by brilliance hidden beneath ordinary appearances. The student stood, calm and steady, a small, triumphant smile playing at his lips. The hall erupted into applause, but even the noise seemed muted compared to the shock radiating from the dragon lady herself. She stepped forward, golden eyes locking with his, and for the first time in history, the legendary test giver acknowledged a student not with fear, but with reverence. This changes everything, she whispered, her voice almost lost in the cheering crowd. A royal does not make a ruler. Brilliance, courage, and insight, these define true mastery. And as the applause and astonished whispers filled the hall, the student turned, eyes sweeping across the crowd, knowing that his journey was far from over. But for now, he had done the impossible. He had turned mockery into awe, defied centuries of expectation, and shown the kingdom that greatness could come from the most unlikely of places. The impossible had been conquered. The final test had been passed. And the dragon lady, legendary and feared, could only watch in stunned admiration as a new kind of hero emerged.